Wonderful. So, good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Nicola Taylor and I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Scotland Is. And if you don't know who Scotland Is are, we are a membership organisation who act as a cluster management organisation, essentially acting as a kind of trade body for the digital tech sector here in Scotland. So today's session will be recorded and I would ask that you keep your cameras and mics off in the first instance. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session, but we would ask that you drop those into the chat box and then I will facilitate those on your behalf at the end of the session. So it's a very exciting week for us here in Scotland, as yesterday marked day one of Scotland's National Innovation Week, a first of its kind. And to mark the occasion, working alongside long-standing Scotland Is member Jump Digital and partnering with the team at Bergman Holt, we launched a research report around the role of the Chief AI Officer in the UK. If you haven't had the opportunity to see that yet, we will pop the link to that in the chat and would recommend you to download that and have a read of it. This Thursday, we host our annual digital conference, ScotSoft, which covers a mix of technical and leadership style talks across 6 streams throughout the day. And we will also host the flagship event of Innovation Week, Scotland's National Innovation Summit. Ticket sales for ScotSoft have now actually closed. However, we are fortunate to have our very talented events producer, Kat Blair, on this call. So if anybody would still like to attend, if you talk nicely to Kat, she might be able to accommodate a ticket for you. What we will do is we will pop the link to ScotSoft so you can see the agenda into the chat for you as well. Now, there is a whole host of activity taking place across Scotland's National Innovation Week, and you can find all the details of everything that is happening and other events that you can attend on the website. And again, we will pop the details of Innovation Week into the chat so that you can see that as well. But on to today's session. We know the old mantra, move fast and break things. However, in AI, the cost of breaking things can be people, trust, and safety. So today is about a better path, building fast and building well. I am delighted to introduce Sidrah Hassan, an AI ethicist who works at the intersection of innovation and governance. Sidrah will explore what happens when governance is traded for speed and, more importantly, how ethics and governance can accelerate product market fit, adoption and long-term value. As I mentioned, the session will run as a presentation, followed by a Q&A, and I would ask that you do pop any of your questions into the chat and we will facilitate those for you at the end. So, without further ado, Sidrah, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and thank you to everyone who's on the call today and joining us. I really appreciate you taking your time out to hear about something that's probably sidelined in this chat of AI. I think AI ethics and AI governance, you probably hear more governance than ethics. But yeah, it's really nice to have a space, a webinar where we can talk about it, really discuss it, see where it fits in this AI life cycle, and actually how it's something that can help speed up success rather than be, you know, the red tape that doesn't allow innovation to grow. So I'm just going to share my screen. 1 second. I do apologize. You'll see yourself first, Nicola, and then I'll move over and then get started.
Yep, we can see your slides. Wonderful.
Perfect. You can see that. Okay, excellent. Yeah, so thank you so much. Like I said, firstly, good morning. It is an absolutely beautiful wet day outside, so that I think makes it quite nice. When I was preparing for this, it was nice to take a break, look outside, and yeah, just get ready for today's webinar. And also, I wanted to thank Scotland Is for hosting me as part of Scotland's National Innovation Week. I'm really excited to be here and talk to everyone who's on the call today. And yeah, like I mentioned, today I want to share with you all how it's not only possible, but should be very desirable to incorporate AI ethics.
Sorry. Just give me 1 second.
Am I okay to go?
Yep, you're okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure that, yeah, what the takeaway that you all have is that it should be very desirable to incorporate AI ethics and governance when you're building in the AI space for current and also future success. But a little bit about me. So most of you probably don't know who I am. I'm Sidrah Hassan. As Nicola mentioned, I'm an AI ethicist. Now, my background is in AI governance, policy, product management. I've done my hand at user research a little bit, and that's all because I come from predominantly a consultancy background. And more recently, I've been working with a nonprofit as an AI ethicist and strategy advisor. I've also worked as a freelance content creator for the BBC on AI ethics content for young people. So you can say that I've had a relatively squiggly career, and I think that the squiggles are still ongoing. But really, everything that I've learned and all the experiences I've had, they've not detracted, they really actually helped to make me a more well-rounded AI ethicist, I would say. And all that experience that I've gained, now I share that back in webinars like this with organizations, clients, people who come to listen to at events and conferences, and generally anyone who's interested at the intersection of tech, ethics, philosophy, and even human rights. However, one non-work related thing that is probably the most important to know about me is that I'm an absolute dessert fiend. And by that, I mean I could be powered solely on cookies and cakes. I think I already started off the conversation with talking about hot chocolate. Tells you a lot about me. I do like to justify that all that sugar is what sometimes fuels all the heavy work that I do. But I don't quite think my dentist is buying that excuse when I'm sitting on his chair. Right, enough about me, and time to dive into what you actually came to listen to and hear all about, and that's AI. Now, AI is everywhere right now and continues to be penetrating in all aspects of our life. I think if my cat could speak, he would also mention some sort of cat GPT casually. But even though it feels like AI is all around us and everyone is talking about it, studies actually show that in the UK, only about 1/3 of adults could confidently explain how modern AI models worked. So, whatever your knowledge in the audience today is, I wanted us to start with the same starting point. So, just starting with the basics, what is AI? A little bit of an explanation before we dive into why we need AI ethics and governance and how it can be more successful for our organizations. So to begin with, what is AI? Well, AI stands for artificial intelligence, and even though it might feel like the invention of AI happened when ChatGPT was thrust upon the world a couple of years ago, AI actually goes back a lot further as a discipline, all the way back to 1956, in fact, when a Dartmouth professor, John McCarthy, was organizing a workshop on the topic of developing ideas on thinking machines. And the title he gave to that workshop was Artificial Intelligence. So this had always been a concept in the computer science field that was thought about, and even before that, something that was explored but didn't quite have a term coined until this workshop in 1956. Now, in today's terms,
Sidrah,
yep.
so apologies to interrupt. It was just a quick note to let you know that we can see your presenter notes as well as
Oh,
the slides.
okay, no worries at all. I was hoping that wasn't the case. Is that okay?
That's perfect. They're away now. Thank you.
Okay, no worries at all. Yeah, so I'll continue on. So AI has, well, artificial intelligence in today's world, or thinking machines, refers to machines that can independently process information, so take in a lot of data and then execute tasks based on that information. So similarly to humans. Now, it's important to remember that AI is an umbrella term for quite a lot of different subfields. And I think the four bigger subfields that you'll come across, although this isn't all of them, is machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, and robotics. Now, machine learning and natural language processing are the two subfields that you'll see more often in general purpose AI. So that is what are some of the inner workings of ChatGPT and sorry, one second, I can hear my son crying in the background, and chatbots and LLMs that we interact with today. Now, how does AI actually work? So again, generative AI is the form of AI that we'll come across most often. So generative AI is AI that is multimodal, which means AI that can respond in audio, text, visual, and photo format. Now, how does generative AI work? So it has a few simple steps. It's trained on data collected from the internet or an organization's proprietary data. So that's data that they've collected on their consumers, their customers, even internally. Then you have algorithms. So algorithms are just a set of rules or instructions that find patterns and sift through that data, finding commonalities. And then based on that data, the AI will produce a desired or sometimes undesired output. So when we are asking, ChatGPT, I don't know, what is the weather like today? It's really filling in the blank based on the data that it can gather from the internet and that it's been trained on. And what you have with this output is that output in the training stage is improved by getting human feedback and practicing until the AI knows what is the desired output and gives that a higher weighting, so it knows that this is the most optimal response. But actually, where you see some of the problems occurring is very much on that first stage. It's that data, because data that is collected is not neutral. Data inherently has a lot of biases. Some of them are explicit, some of them are implicit. And this is where you've probably heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. This is because of your training data. If you're putting training data in that has a lot of gaps, has a lot of biases, has a lot of flaws, you're going to see that in the output. And that becomes very problematic when you're using AI for customer service or for any outputs that affect people or operations. Now, to give you some context on why data is not neutral, why it's flawed, I wanted to show you the population or the percentage of population that are using the internet just 2 years ago. So only 67% of the world's population was actually online. So that's just a little bit over a half. So there's almost a third of the world that doesn't even have access to the internet, meaning that their data isn't being collected in any way. So when we are building AI systems and products that have very far-reaching consequences onto the world, they're not actually reflecting what the world looks like, which gives rise to biases and discrimination. Out of the 67% of the world's population that was online, 97% of it was North America, 90% of Europe and Central Asia, but only 37% of sub-Saharan Africa. So again, just to reiterate what I was saying, that if these companies, so a lot of them will be frontier model AI companies like your OpenAI, your Anthropic, etc. But that does filter down. When you're scraping the internet for data, you can see how that bias and how that discrimination and flaws start to then punctuate the outputs. Now, just to give you an idea of how some of these then manifest in the real world, I've collated some recent and some quite infamous examples of types of harms that can be caused by AI. Now, I think you can start off with the comical ones like cheese not sticking to pizza. So the AI overview of Gemini.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
As you know.
You're on mute, Sidrah.
Sidrah, you've gone on to mute. I don't think we can't hear you anymore. I'm not sure what's happened.
Apologies. I don't know how that happened. Is that okay?
That's you, you're back.
Okay, apologies. A webinar that isn't without its hitches today. I'm not sure where I left off. Was it? up until here.
Probably
Yeah.
best to start, I think just if you start that slide again, Sidrah, I think we got a little bit off it and then it went on to mute. So if you just start from
Okay.
the beginning of that slide, that would be perfect.
No worries. Apologies, I really don't know what's happening. Yeah, so what I was mentioning is that I've collated some of the examples of types of AI-enabled harms that happen as a result of, one, that flawed data and the biases and discrimination that happens as a result of having data that isn't fully representative of the customers that it's serving. Here we've got, starting off with a comical one, you have Gemini's AI overview. So someone asked, my cheese isn't sticking to the pizza. So Gemini responded with, you can also add about 1/8 cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to give it more tackiness. So I think this was maybe about two years ago, it was 2023 or 2024. And this became infamous quite quickly. But then from comical errors and hallucinations like this, it starts to become a little bit more serious. So you've got Amazon's hiring bias, for example. So Amazon was using an AI hiring tool that sifted through CVs, and what it realized was that it was actually sifting out female CVs because of the training data that it had been trained on. And that training set had predominantly included male CVs, reflecting the gender imbalance of the tech industry at the time, although I feel like you could argue that we haven't made a huge amount of progress. And as a result, the algorithm learned that the rule actually is that a male CV is rated higher because that has been what's been previously successful in the training data that was provided. And then Amazon tried to anonymize the names on the CVs, but it had made further patterns and commonalities in the CV. So for example, if a CV was anonymized, but it said, extracurricular was netball team, it associated that with a female applicant and then sifted it out. So in the end, they had to scrap it all together. So you can imagine the time, the cost, and also the reputational damage. I mean, this has been spoken about 10 plus years later still, was quite a lot. Then you've got another one. This is an OpenAI example where ChatGPT is asked to do a performance review for both John and Jane, given exact same details, but the overall performance rating for John is exceeding expectation, while for Jane it's only meeting expectation. Again, highlighting that in its training data is picked up on gender bias and replicated that in the output as being the correct output. Then we get on to, unfortunately, some more grim and recent realities where we have this man with his family here. This was Robert Williams. He was wrongfully incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit because a facial recognition system highlighted his driving license as being the perpetrator, despite not being the perpetrator. And the only reason was because that facial recognition system hadn't been trained on enough black and brown faces to pick out nuances and accurately detect people with darker skin tones. And then you might have seen more recently, we've got companies like Character AI. So here, this mother is suing the AI chatbot Character AI because it led her son to unfortunately commit suicide. We had a similar one with OpenAI recently. So this is the Adam Rain family, or Adam Rain and his family are suing OpenAI because the chatbot again encouraged him to take his own life. And then ChatGPT again fed a man's delusion, and he ended up killing his mum and then himself afterwards. So again, we're seeing this rise of AI chatbots being used for therapy, but actually vulnerable groups and minority groups are really at the risk of some severe harm, and we're starting to see these harms come out. So this is really to highlight that when we're building AI systems and AI products, especially in commercial organizations and settings, no one sets out with the intention of malintention. No one sets out with intentions of hurting someone. But actually, it's what we don't do in our foundations. It's how we build our foundations. And if they're built without those ethical and governance guardrails in place, then these examples are not that far-fetched. And that's because of AI technology being an unprecedented technology. I'll talk about it a little bit later as well, but AI isn't like building websites AI can have the way people interact with AI as well. They really rely on it. And as a result, those guardrails become so much more important when we have children using AI, when we want to introduce AI into education. You can understate the importance of AI ethics and governance. So yeah, I've spoken about this a little bit now. What is AI ethics and governance? So AI ethics and governance is it's not just a nice to have, it's really an organizational need in order to protect the safety of your customers, the reputation of your business, and to future-proof in the age of AI-enabled harms like you just seen, and also an evolving compliance and regulatory landscape. So we know the EU AI Act is coming into full enforcement in August 2026. AI ethics and governance can look different for various different organizations and companies depending on their context, but usually it's having some sort of framework in which you're promoting transparency as to how decisions get made, steps in place to mitigate bias that can happen as a result of any inequality in the training data, and you're actively have procedures to counteract that. It could look like a full-blown AI policy, but it could also look like asking yourself ethical questions. And just if you're working in a sprint agile methodology, it could just be the engineering and product teams asking them, actually, by doing this action, how does it affect our customers and their civil liberties? How does, robust testing, what does that mean in the output? What risk mitigations should we be thinking about? And really, this is all to ensure that, firstly, you're thinking of the customer, so safety of your customer. You're ensuring that your AI products and services protect their human rights, their fundamental rights, and that includes fairness, transparency, but also privacy. Your brand's reputation, so your organization, customer loyalty has evolved a lot, and that includes many factors now in order to have that customer loyalty. And one of them is brand reputation, and an AI mishap can lead to damaging that customer trust long term. You've got compliance and regulation that I've mentioned. So you've got the EU AI Act, but because the landscape is evolving, you've also got other compliance regulations that apply to some industries like fintech or insurance, ISO standards. And then also, it's about becoming trailblazers. Now, if you've got strong ethical and governance foundations, that will really enable your teams to understand where the guardrails are and then be able to have the confidence to move with pace because the due diligence has been done up front, as opposed to moving at pace, coming across unknowns, making the best guess, and that leads to a mishap. Now, how do you apply AI ethics and governance? So I like to break it into four, quadrants really. And again, in the next slide, I'll go into a little bit more detail, but the reason I've kept it high level for this webinar is really because it depends on your organizational context. It really depends on what product and service it is that you're selling to your customers. Who are your customers? What do they value? What are your organization's values and aims? Some might be B Corp, for example, so they have they have an ESG goal, etc. Maybe there's another company where that's not as high a priority for them. It's maybe they're in a regulated industry and they need to be compliant as number one. So because this looks different, I like to take a high level approach. So firstly, it's that AI governance piece. And again, I mentioned it can look like either a full-blown AI policy, it could look like a checklist for your sprint teams when they're building the product in the different stages of the product life cycle. It could look like just having some ethical principles that are your North Star. So when you're creating a product or service, this is the North Star that guides you. These are our principles. Are we adhering to these principles? It can really be a spectrum of AI governance. So actually, where do you fall in that spectrum? How much governance do you need? Does it need to be more holistic? In which case, like I say, having those principles are good, having those conversations and discussions in your product and development teams are good. Or actually, are you in a more regulated industry? It has more of an impact on your maybe business, your revenue, your customers. Then you want to be thinking about that. What is our policy? Do we have a chief AI officer? Do we have a governance or ethics officer? How can we be working with our legal, security, and IT teams to make sure that we're robust and have the correct risk mitigations in place? Secondly, AI ethical literacy. Now, we can't expect our teams to be building ethical AI products or AI products where they have the end customer's civil liberties in mind, not just the end customer's needs and wants in mind, but really going a step beyond that without actually training them and providing them that literacy of what harms can be caused and how that happens. And I think it starts off with, I've rolled out an AI literacy program for over 1,400 employees in my last company. And tailoring that content and that literacy program really depends on how people are interacting. So for example, the teams who are building the AI products and services may need more hands-on training and understanding what civil liberties we're talking about, exactly who is your customer demographic, what matters to these customers, how can you bring them into the user research piece and design around them. Whereas teams outside of that who will just be interacting with AI tools, maybe internal tools, they need a different kind of ethical AI literacy. Third, thought diversity. Now, this might seem quite straightforward and not specific to AI ethics and governance, but I would argue that it is, especially in this climate where we're seeing a massive rollback with diversity, inclusion, and equity. It's really important to hold steadfast and double down on your commitment with having thought diversity in your teams. And not only is it important because it's a good thing to do, but it's actually, there was a McKinsey report recently on diversity monitoring, which showed that companies who have active inclusive hiring practices and DE&I commitments outperform 39% versus other teams who don't. So it actually has a bottom line financial impact as well. Your teams perform better, which leads to better customer satisfaction, which leads to more revenue. So there is a financial incentive to having this thought diversity. And then 4 is that psychological safety piece. So it's more holistic. You can't expect to have diverse teams and that ticks the box and that's it. You really need to allow these teams to be able to have that psychological safety to call out when things are going wrong, to say, actually, I know the whole team agrees with this, but I think that this could harm people a little bit later down the line. Or there's this maybe niche use case that I think we should think about and discuss a little bit more before we decide to go on this, down this path. And to give you a personal example as well, in my last job, we were building an internal AI chatbot, and everybody was quite happy with the name of the chatbot. And it was, I can't even remember, but it was a female name. And now I have read a lot about how anthropomorphizing AI technologies, especially giving it female names, female voices, plays into this patriarchal, submissive dichotomy, and what that means for then emotional intelligence of people who are interacting with those technologies. So I was a little bit uncomfortable, but thankfully I had the psychological safety to call it out, even though I was the only one who had that view and brought in that perspective. And actually, through that discussion, we ended up changing the name to something that was platonic. It wasn't kind of gendered name at all. And that is an example of, because there was thought diversity in the team and there was psychological safety to be able to call it out, because it's much better to be called out earlier by your teammates than it is to be hated by your customers later down the line, and to have that reputational damage and to think, oh, actually, we could have foreseen this before. Now, as I come to wrap up, this is a bit more detailed example of how you can apply AI ethics and governance. And like I say, I've kept it light touch because I'm a very big believer of it is individual to organizational context. While there is a golden thread, it very much depends. So take this with a pinch of salt, that not everything will apply to your organization, but definitely something from this will. So on the left hand side, you have Devo Team, who are a consulting company. They've published quite a comprehensive ethical AI usage checklist, which I think is a fantastic infographic and puts into, you know, like a visual format what a lot of the milestones that you'll be looking at when you're looking at your governance strategy, for example. So establishing a clear ethical principles, implementing a robust ethical or governance framework, focusing on transparency and explainability. You might choose to focus on transparency and bias. You might choose to focus on bias and safety. So again, this will differ for different organizations. Prioritizing data governance and privacy. Again, this might matter more for some companies versus others. Mitigating bias and ensuring fairness, defining roles and responsibilities, or responsibility and accountability. So I think this is really important. It's that risk mitigation piece. So when things maybe do go wrong, where does that responsibility and accountability lie? How do you make sure you're addressing that? Fostering a human-centered design and implementation, measuring and monitoring ethical impacts, promoting education and training, again, that literacy piece, ensuring that it's a collaborative process. This technology is extremely fast-paced and fast-moving, that it really needs to be collaborative with multiple stakeholders in order to get a holistic lens and view of actually where to go and to future-proof yourself. Maintaining that continuous review and improvement, and then addressing any sustainability concerns. On the right-hand side, this is screenshots from my online AI ethics resource, online tool. So it's the aiethicshub.co.uk. And what I've done there is, this is specifically aimed at product teams with 4 different user personas. So you've got your product manager, business analyst, designer, and then your engineer. And it's 5 different questions at 5 different stages of the product lifecycle that you should be considering and discussing in order to bring that ethical lens, you know, sooner into the process. So this is the discovery piece, the probably initial phase of a product life cycle. So have you considered the diversity of the team involved in the design and development of the AI systems, including their demographic, diversity, and a broad range of expertise? Does your team feel confident to voice any concerns or different opinions to the majority? So again, it's bringing in that thought diversity and that psychological safety aspect to make sure that you've got that solid foundation. And what I hope that, having gone through this has been quite a whirlwind tour of AI ethics and governance. I've not been able to, you know, deep dive into many aspects that I maybe would when I'm talking to a client or an organization. But it's to give you an idea of, when we're not thinking about AI ethics and governance, you know, I come across a handful of clients who are like, but actually that doesn't really matter for our product because we're not dealing with sensitive data, or, you know, our customers are just more keen on what we're innovating on as opposed to how we're being responsible. I can guarantee you that this will matter at some point in that life cycle, and your customers will care when things go wrong. So it's about having that knowledge and being able to bring it into the product development lifecycle earlier on. And that is me. If you would like to, I mean, I know we're going to do questions soon, but if you would like to connect with me and ask me any other questions or have any follow-ups, then this is the QR code for my LinkedIn. Feel free to find me there, connect, and then, yeah, can answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sidrah. That was very insightful. As Sidrah mentioned there, if you have any questions, then you can pop those into the chat and I can ask them for you. Certainly, I have a couple of questions here, so you're definitely not getting let off the hook. So I'll start with one, which is hopefully a nice, easy one for you as it kind of continues on from your presentation. But if you had a responsible AI checklist, shall we say, what would be the kind of 3 key items that you would have on that checklist?
Oh, that is a very good question. If it was very high level, I think I want to immediately answer with more questions, like what industry is it?
Yeah.
I think one, it would definitely be literacy, because it's really important for the teams and the organizations to have that knowledge and know what they're building for, and also what they're trying to prevent from happening, for example. So literacy would definitely be one. I would then say you want to have a governance framework, so it can be light touch. again, depending on what your use cases are and what your products and services that you're building. And then that governance framework as well should probably touch upon if you know any regulations impact you. Literacy, governance framework, and I think, I mean, this is from my product manager background, but I think it's really important to have that North Star of what is your
Yeah.
vision. And actually what are those like fundamental principles that underpin what you're trying to do. So I think incorporating those ethical principles as the underpinning the North Star are really helpful. So I think those would be the three things.
Wonderful, thank you. So we do have a question in the chat here as well. So it's around kind of future risks. And the question asks, what safeguards are needed against misuse of advanced AI?
Advanced AI. It's a very good question. I think it's probably there's two approaches, and one I wouldn't be able to talk to as much, but there's a technical approach. So for advanced AI, I don't know if by that the person who's asked the question means like AGI, like advanced well, artificial general intelligence, or just yeah, it would be good to know the definition of advanced
Yep.
AI from them. But there'd probably be a technical solution. So you really need to look at how can you mitigate the bias in the initial outputs in the training phases, and is it enough to just, you know, counteract that with human feedback, so reinforcement learning from human feedback, or are there other mitigations in place? So I know that there's this big field of research into like mechanistic interpretability, which is AI systems can be very black box into how they make their decisions. So how can we understand that a bit more? So I think that would be, yeah, that's definitely an area that I follow, but I'm not technical enough to fully well, regurgitate everything. But yeah, I think so there'd be technical elements. And then I think non-technical or more commercial things that organizations could do, or commercial organizations, what safeguards they can put in place is having like an active human in the loop, so that if this out, or you know, even having a framework. There was a really good, oh, it was one of the big four consulting firms that did it. I can't remember if it was McKinsey or someone else. Basically, it had a checklist, and it was saying, if this AI only speaks to another AI, then you need, you know, you don't need a human that needs to like check it. It's okay, because if it breaks, then we'll know we have then this person who's doing the last minute check. If this AI is talking to an internal team member, then the internal team member who's receiving the output needs to check. If this AI is making a decision that impacts our customer, then we need to have two different levels of like you know, employees who are checking here and checking there. So I think, yeah, those are probably the two things that I would say.
Excellent, thank you. So another question that's come in to the chat as well is, how do we avoid AI deepening inequality between nations?
That's a really good question. It's very close to my heart. It's a really difficult one, because I think at the moment there's the United Nations General Assembly happening. So the nonprofit that I work with, our founder is there. You know, we've created a policy brief to talk about how do you actually create accountability measures, and how do you ensure that, you know, a lot of the labor for AI systems, unfortunately, like the data labeling, the data annotations, all of the kind of ghost work is done in the global south, but the global south never tend to get the benefits of that technology. That's always reaped in the global north. And I think it's accountability for me, from having been in this space, from going in it from and you know, like AI governance and international cooperation lens as well, there's a massive lack of accountability. And I think until we have those accountability measures in place, we can't really start to like, I know I've talked a lot about frameworks today, and I might sound like I'm contradicting myself a little, but a framework is great in you know, theory, but if there's no accountability measures tied to it, if there's no risk mitigation, if there's no processes that clearly show how this this framework is going to be acted upon, then it's useless. Then it's this
Yeah.
another framework adding on to the millions of frameworks that we've already got, right? So I think it's by, and one thing that I would say from my personal experience, it has been through grassroots organizations. So joining grassroots organizations that are actually actively challenging these narratives and dialogues, finding that community. One, it's great for your mental health. Two, it's good to just have people who are value aligned to what you believe in. And then having that, you know, like building that critical mass to then challenge, act positively those dialogues from big institutions that aren't holding accountability at the forefront of what they're saying.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So obviously, you know, the vast majority of organisations that kind of exist within Scotland are kind of, you know, sit within that SME space, which often means that there isn't a kind of singular person or team that are responsible for kind of AI within the organisation. So one of the questions I have is around, for smaller organisations, kind of who would be the appropriate person to kind of own AI, I guess, within the organisation, and how do you avoid it becoming just a kind of tick box exercise if there's no kind of one specific person with that functionality within the business?
That's a very good question, and that's a hard one. And I think it would be difficult to get right. And again, it'll have a lot of nuances. But I think at that point, AI governance or AI ethics or responsible AI, whatever you want to brand it, needs to be as part of your like strategy. So I think a lot of the times I talk to customers in the terms of strategy, because that's, you know, you need to meet people where they're at, and that's what's important to them, that's what's important to their organization. So it needs to be baked into that strategy so that when people are doing their individual roles, is actually it's part of their roles and responsibilities already baked in. So I think at that point it's not something that is a separate thing, it's something that actually it's just, you know, like it's just kind of baked in. I think, to give you a really bad analogy, because I love an analogy, you know, like when I go throughout my day, I don't need to actively think about, I'll need to stop and eat a meal. I will just do that because I'll get hungry and I'll eat it. It's like ingrained into me as a human. It's just something that I need to do. But if I was to be throwing like a specific, you know, like birthday party or like a dinner party or something, creating that menu, cooking that food, eating there's a lot more thought, and it's a separate thing. So eating food every day, part of my like every day. That's my that's my sustenance, and it's just something that's going to happen. Whereas a dinner party is something much more, okay, you know, like me and someone else needs to think about this, who's going to cook the food, like it's over there. So I think that's how you can make it as part of your strategy. If you think about it, it's this everyday part of our everyday DNA, rather than something that we can think about later or something that we can maybe outsource to someone else.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a great answer. Thank you. So one last question here in the chat, and then I think we'll kind of move to wrap things up because conscious of time. And it's one for your opinion, more than anything, Sidrah. So, what, in your opinion, is an AI ethicist?
I love that. In my opinion, an AI ethicist is really a catch-all phrase right now. Even though I know that that is my title, so again, it will very much be contradictory. But I think this might sound a little skeptical, but it's probably from being in the field for a little while. So I've been in this field for about like 2.5-ish years, and AI ethics or an AI ethicist can be very performative depending on what organization it sits on. And again, like Nicola, you've alluded to, sometimes it can be a tick box exercise. What an AI ethicist, in my opinion, should be is someone who is thinking about tech very holistically. So they're a generalist in the sense that they apply a sociological, philosophical lens to the output and also the input of tech. That's how I would see it. And then have challenging, sometimes theoretical, sometimes philosophical questions with teams who are building that product in order to make sure that they have, really covered off all scenarios. And actually, so I think phones is a really good example, just because, or social media, because it's been about enough for us to see what the harms are. So when social media first came out, people, and we're all using it. It's great, it's exciting, it connects us. Again, there was this hype, we were all bought in. I mean, I started off my social media from Bebo all the way to, I deleted Twitter or X actually, like, God, 20 years ago, because it was a cesspit then. But I've gone through it, and now we're really coming to a critical point where we're seeing how it impacts our mental health, how it impacts children and young people's mental health, how it isn't great for our attention. Again, I have tried to go cold turkey from social media apart from LinkedIn, and I still crave that stimulation and that dopamine. And I'm just, I'll just pick my phone up and there's nothing to do and I'm just scrolling. So it's really an AI ethicist, in my opinion, is there to stop that from happening with AI, is to take the learnings and use disciplines that have existed. And again, fundamentally, it'll be like philosophy, maybe psychology, and really and ethics, and bringing that into the technical lens and saying, actually, how do these systems and how do these technologies, how do we grapple with them in these scenarios, and when it does come to someone's civil liberty.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, like I say, we're due to finish just shortly. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to everybody who has joined us today for the presentation. And obviously a huge thank you to yourself as well, Sidrah, for doing the presentation and for the great answers to all of those questions that were asked at the end there as well. We really appreciate it. If anybody does have any other questions for Sidrah that they would like to put to her, then we would be more than happy to make introductions or ask those on your behalf later. Sidrah, can I just double check, are you happy for us to share the slides with everybody? Yeah.
I will send them.
Excellent.
I just wanted to say a quick apology. I didn't know that you could see I think that's my biggest ick ever. So I really apologize. I will cringe after this call fully. Sorry that you could see my notes. Hopefully afterwards it was all fine, and sorry for the kind of little glitches that happened throughout.
Listen, would it even be a webinar if we didn't have some tech glitches? I think that's par for the course now, and handled like a champ, Sidrah, so no need to apologise.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming as well. I really appreciate it.
At all. If anybody didn't get the chance to capture the QR code at the end of the presentation as well, we're more than happy to facilitate introductions to Sidrah on your behalf. So if you'd like that done, then reach out to myself or Kat. We'll happily do that for you. But we will share the recording and the slides with you probably at some point next week. But we'll get that across to you. Thank you again, everybody, for joining the call. And again, thank you, Sidrah. Really appreciate you taking the time, and the presentation was brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you
Great
so
to
much.
see everybody. And yeah, if there's anything that we can do to help facilitate introductions, etc., then just let us know. But we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, everybody.